All right, welcome everyone. Very happy you could join us today. We are pleased to host our last presentation for Open Ed Week. There are still more presentations this afternoon and tomorrow at OE Global that I would invite you to check out. But today we are joined by Dave Ghidiu from Finger Lakes Community College. Dave is an assistant professor in the computer science program, and he's going to teach us how to use some Google tools that can be used to create and administer open content. So I'm always look forward to Dave's presentations. He is a dynamic presenter and individual. So welcome, Dave.
Thanks. I think I'm going to put in the chat real quick a link to the presentation so you can have your own copy or do whatever you want with it. So let me just find my Zoom and put it in the chat. So everyone in the meeting. There it is. You don't have to go here now. I can put it in at the end as well, but it does have a slide at the end with all the links of things that I reference. So I think I'm gonna share my screen. We don't have Zoom at my institution, so it's always like a mixed bag on see what happens. And I will be presenting using Google Slides. Now I do want to get started. I guess I have like really one ground rule, and that's like, I can't see the chat. If you have a question, just like, this is a conversation, or at least in my mind's a conversation. So like, certainly just like unmute yourself and just shout something out and interrupt me.
And do you want me to do the same if there's something in the chat for you?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay.
I appreciate that. So I also always like to start with something that has nothing to do with the presentation. I mean, I guess this kind of is. But usually I go to slidescarnival.com. I don't know if you've been there, but they have great templates for both Google Slides and also PowerPoint. And this is also in the last slide, this URL. And it's CCBY, and their templates are freaking out of this world. So I usually use Slides Carnival. And there's a few other companies that do this, but I love Slides Carnival, and it's CCBY. So, but I didn't find one that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted like a material design type of thing. So I was like, I'm gonna make one from scratch. And I encountered this website, which is also, there's a link to this in the last slide. It's called Coolors. It's like colors but cool. And this is the coolest thing that I have to share with you. If you are not good at colors, and I am not, then you go to this website and you can either prime it. You can say, hey, here's a color I really like. Or you can just hit the space bar and it will cycle through. When you find one color you like let's say I like this red, I can lock it. And every color that comes up will be part of a palette. So I can build my palette however I want. And I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So I can lock that one in and then just keep hitting space and it generates them. So I really, really like coolors.co and Slides Carnival. It's just kind of one of the things I encountered as I was coming up with this template. And also, and I know this, like, it really eats me up when people do presentations in PowerPoint on a Zoom where it's not the full screen, but it's just like this piece right here. And unfortunately, I am going to do that, but it's going to be intentional today because I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between my class and this presentation. Google Slides does have this thing where you can hide the film strip, and I'm going to bring the comments down a little bit. And I'm also going to go into this mode. So I'll make it as big as I can, but still kind of preserve the tabs. And I guess the first thing I want to do is talk to you about what this project is, how long it's been going on for, and kind of just give you a tour of the course. So all the classes that I teach in the department are OER, and usually I've gone back and forth between using pre-made stuff, editing stuff that I found, or just generating it. This right here is kind of like my magnum opus. This is an information security class, and it's really hard to find an OER for information security just to begin with, because like it's constantly a changing field, and also there just really isn't much that's in the resources that I found. So in my information security class, I created an OER from scratch, and this is kind of the journey. So the first thing I want to do is show you what the actual class looks like. So this is in Blackboard, and I'm going to click in current experiences. and every chapter is here. And I think I'm just going to go into chapter 6. So every chapter kind of has the same thing where there's a reading and then a quiz. And then once you get an 80 or above on the quiz, and you can take as many times as you want, then it gives you some more content. So I'm going to switch over to the student perspective here and show you the reading is actually done in Google Docs. I created it in Google Docs, and depending on the semester and kind of what my objective is about building up this resource, the permissions change. So like, as I was creating it, I let students actually add content to it. And now it's locked down so that students can comment on it. And that'll make sense a little bit later on in this talk today. But and you can see like students are actually still making changes to it, which is really, really neat. And then once you take the quiz, then you get some labs. And the labs are kind of the crux of this course. And we use Google Docs for that as well. And I'll show you the labs in a little bit. And then there's this share assignments, where I always have the students post something in LinkedIn regarding the chapter. And part of that is because I want them to have a professional public facing experience every chapter, keeping up with the content, because that helps them when they're looking for internships. But also because it shows me that they can stay current on the topics. And the third thing is kind of a media literacy. You know, I have to coach them in the first week or two when they're posting these to be like, hey, here's a good way to do this. So I partner with the Writing Center for that. And then the fourth reason is because it really sources more content and more current events so that I can add to this OER. And then the second thing is I have them add questions. And sometimes the questions are based on the reading, sometimes they're based on the labs, because these questions get put into the pool for the semester or for the chapter. And so like my pool constantly grows, and they're student-driven questions. So I just want to show you a lab experience real quick, and you don't have to have any cybersecurity experience with this. But the way that it works is all the labs are Google Docs. And when you click on the link, it forces a copy. So the student gets a copy of this Google Doc. And one of the things that's really important is that I use this textual hierarchy. It's called the document outline in Google Docs, where I use titles and I use headings instead of just like formatting the font. So you can see that this is a heading 1, and then this is also like a heading. And the reason I do that is because it gives you this right here, this kind of like document outline or an outline. And you can hop around, which makes it really easy for grading, for assessing, because I can just click on this and we'll jump down to where it is. So the student is supposed to like delete this screenshot, take their own screenshot and put it back in. So in all these labs are also all OER. See, everything that's published in this class is OER. And then once the book is done, I'll take you through that journey. Well, actually, we'll do that right now. So let me just pop this open and just start cycling through here. One of the most important things I think in just open education, one of the things that gets glossed over sometimes is that, like, in addition to having the content on like day 0, in computer nerd speak, that's what we call day 1 because we start counting at 0. But like the students get it. But this quote, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. So this book that has been in progress for 2.5 years, or maybe 5 semesters. This book has passed through hundreds of eyes of students. And I have a column in my grade book called Bug Bounty. And I'm like, listen, if you ever find something in the book that's like factually incorrect, or in the quiz, because they're student generated questions, and I try and vet most of them, but I don't get them all. If you see something and you let me know, then you'll get a bug bounty, you'll get extra points. And in the biz of bug bounty, we say, like, for software, that's, there are people out there who look for bugs in software and report to the company, and they get money for that. There's people who make a lot of money just finding these bugs. So I contextualize this, like having the eyeballs look over the work, as a bug bounty. But in an English class, you could have it as like a copy editor, or in a history class, you could say you are fact checkers, or like in any other class, you could say you're peer reviewing. So I have some kind of reward system for an incentive for looking through it. So it's important for me to have that in the class from the get-go. And then I do talk to the students about open pedagogy and why it's important. And I do think it's important for students to contribute to the knowledge base, especially in computer science. But not everything I do in the class is open source. For instance, or OER, Darknet Diaries podcast, which I have students listen to a lot, that's not OER. And I do use some of their images. I talked to Jack Resider, who runs a podcast. I was like, hey, you know, I'm doing this project. Do you mind if I assign your podcast and use your images in the textbook? And he's like, that would be great. That's perfect. So not everything we do is open pedagogy, but most of it is, and almost everything the students produce, whether, for instance, LinkedIn or working on the book, is in the public sphere. One of the other reasons why, yes.
Sorry. Are there concerns about, I mean, the LinkedIn part of having students share that is such a great idea, but are there worries about if they share copyrighted documents as PDFs?
So in LinkedIn, they're actually, that's a good question. And we do a small primer on open pedagogy and OER in Creative Commons. I should do more, but we also cover it in our intro class, which they have necessarily taken for this class. But what they're sharing on LinkedIn is every week there's a topic, and for this topic, it's staying safe at home. So their task is to find 3 articles from like Wired magazine, ZDNet, kind of approved sources, not approved, but like reliable sources. And they have to parse it and summarize it and say, like, here's my 3 takeaways. So they're not, I guess it doesn't matter if it's copyrighted material, because this component of it is public facing, but not OER. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. And quite frankly, I think this is the hardest part for students, is to like, because oftentimes the very first chapter is, you know, post 3 articles on information security, and they'll be like, read this article, it's really good. And then, you know, I have to like coach them and say, well, that doesn't do the reader of your post any good. So there is a media literacy component in here, because they have to like parse it and tell basically their post needs to kind of spoil the article a little bit, or at least provide takeaways so that the reader can read the student's post and not have to read the whole article because they have some takeaways from it. So there is kind of this media literacy component to it. And one of the other things that's really important about, and we just saw this in the security realm last week. So Samsung shipped 100 smartphones that had an encryption weakness in it. And the reason there was an encryption weakness is because their algorithm for cryptography, most algorithms for cryptography are public. You can see it, which is great because you get a lot of eyeballs on it. Theirs was not. And it turned out that there was a huge flaw. So now Samsung has 100 million phones out there because they black box their security. So it's important specifically for these students to understand why you want to share your work and make sure it's open so that other people can inspect it. One of the other kind of happy accidents, you've probably seen XKCD comics at some point in your life. Most of them have people in them, and it kind of is like an office-based type theme, but usually they're a little tech nerdy. And so I really want to use them in the OER textbook, and I was like, I can't. And then I looked, and they actually are OER or Creative Commons. So I actually did email the author, and I was like, hey, can I put these in my textbook? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. So this textbook also has kind of like the modern tropes of some kind of comics, and it kind of has an oatmeal type vibe if you've ever read the oatmeal comics. And then we use Darknet Diaries podcast. So there are other sources coming into the course. But this is how the sausage gets made right here. When I first started this experience, and I knew I wanted to do an OER because I actually was using a different textbook. It was kind of way too technical for the objectives for the course. And the guy who taught the course before me didn't really have much that I could use. So I was like, okay, we got to start from scratch. So I looked through, 15 different information security viable textbooks, knowing that I wasn't going to use any of them, but I kind of want to see, like, do they match up? Are they aligned with what the students need to get as per FLCC's course or syllabus? And I was like, okay. So I saw kind of the common trends, what most of the textbooks had in common. I was like, okay, so these seem like the topics, and I cross-referenced it with our learning outcomes, and they they seemed to match. So I was like, okay, so now I have a framework. I know at least what I want to teach. So the very first step was I made a Google Doc and I made it available to the students, but they could actually edit the Google Doc. And so for every chapter, they would have to, for every chapter, they'd have to pick something. So I did some of the writing, like I would give, you know, I would start the writing, but if I was like, okay, now this chapter is talking about viruses, every student in the class has to pick a virus and provide, like, do some research, provide a definition, some examples, and how to protect yourself. So the very first semester, this is actually what the textbook looked like. It had a lot of my words in it, but then in kind of approachable and digestible pieces, the students had to pick one thing. And then by the end of this semester, or the end of this chapter, all of this was filled in. And I was like, okay, so that was stage one. And then of course, like over the either winter break or summer break, I forgot which semester I started this, but let's say over the summer break, I would spend some more time editing it and doing some fact checking. And for the most part, students had done it well, but I wanted to get my perspective over it. And then the second semester, I was like, for your share components, instead of writing, because the students last semester kind of filled it in, I want you to write questions based on the reading. And at first I just had them submit them in Blackboard, but that was a lot of overhead for me to kind of parse it and put it in a Blackboard, like in a quiz. So now I have them do it in a Google form, and it's a lot easier because it dumps it into a spreadsheet and I can just have Blackboard suck that up and add that to the pool. So the second semester students were just doing exclusively reading or questions on the reading. And that became this quiz right here. So this quiz has a pool of, like, I don't know, 200 questions. So I was teaching 3 sections every semester, 2 or 3 sections. So they sourced those questions. And of course I had to, like, review them, and I did offer the bug bounty. And then the third semester, I was like, okay, so we have questions based on the reading that the students have sourced. We have the reading that the students kind of helped me fill in. And again, I did the heavy lifting on that, and they kind of did the seasoning and the condiments and the side dishes. And then the third semester, I had the students do a TLDR, which in internet slang is too long, didn't read. So the students would have to, and again, there's like a media literacy piece here. The students would have to read the chapter, and they would parse it into 2 or 3 sentences. So a TLDR is, say you make a long post in Reddit, at the end or the beginning, you say TLDR, and it's like 1 or 2 second sentence gist of the entire section. So I had students do that, and I just copied and pasted them into this Google Doc. And so I spent, again, like winter break or summer break, kind of going through these and seeing what the students thought the big takeaways were. And then I would, like, say this one was a really good takeaway, I would highlight this. And at the end of the chapter in the book, I had my own, I would have like the chapter summaries, and it would be these TLDRs that the students authored. And all along, they're still doing a bug bounty for the questions that they're encountering, and they're doing a bug bounty for the content in the book. And then in semester 4, I had students edit the content. So they would actually, like, be on the lookout for things that need to be changed. And this could be grammatical errors, it could be factual errors, it could be syntax errors. And you can see right now, let's see, I'm going to wait for the comments to load. At this point, the document is locked down so that anyone who has a link can leave comments, but not change the content. So I'm going to hide this document outline. So right now, there's a lot of comments that are waiting to be resolved in here. And you can see that, like, students are suggesting I delete this and put that in favor. So they're clarifying the language of the document to make it more approachable for the student. So there's a whole bunch of comments in here. There they are right there. I had them hidden. So you can see like all these students have gone through and started making suggestions, and I was like, okay, that's nice, because I'm not an author, but they're now editing my work and previous students' works to make it a more solid production. And then semester 5, the book is really starting to take shape now, because it has the heart of the content, it has the flourishes from the students. Now I have a question bank on the reading. Now I also have chapter summaries that the students have parsed in their own language. Now we have some select students doing the editing. So most students can do it. I actually gave some students, for instance, this semester, I have a student named Shannon who's really, really good at this stuff. And she's going through and she has actually edit capabilities, not just commenting capabilities. So Shannon's going through the book and she's making it, she's doing the copy editing, she's doing the grammar, and she's doing a really, really good job. And then I also had a student who was like, listen, like I came into this class with prior knowledge. Like I work in industry, I already have all the certifications. This class is kind of like a formality for me. And so once he showed me his certification and everything, I was like, listen, I have maybe 40 labs in this class. Do you want to like do video tutorials for each lab? Because oftentimes that was the pain point for students. Like, well, I can't get this thing to work. So he's like, absolutely. So Christian made YouTube tutorials for every single lab in the class. And that was his contribution to this OER. And I was like, listen, if you do this, just so you know, you're going to have to license your videos as CC BY. He's like, that's fine. So he did that. Now, I also, and I guess I'm missing a semester here, but I also had students, in addition to writing questions on the reading, once I had a solid bank of questions for that, I then said, listen, we need to have a question bank for the labs too. So at the end of the chapter, after they do the labs, after they do their share assignment, there's another quiz. And this quiz assesses both the reading and all the experiences that have been that they've experienced in the actual lab section. So these questions had to be sourced from somewhere as well, and those I'm actually sourcing those right now. So if the student clicks in this chapter, you'll see that they are authoring questions based on the labs. So that's the next step. After that, all the content will be in the course. And my future goals are to do two things. One is I'd like to have students generate lab experience if they have prior experience, or do design work. I'm looking at doing OLI. So Hal did his, I worked with Hal last year to use an OLI class that I no longer teach. That was last semester I taught. It was really cool. I was like, oh, it would be really sick to get this in there. So I'm really stoked about Taurus. But the next thing is, the textbook isn't printed right now. This is an OER that we did in the department for our Java class. And we went kind of through the same process, except we did most of the heavy lifting for the content. And our bookstore printed out, but then we also got, I was like, I wonder if Amazon can do it. So Amazon can print this book for roughly like $12, and it's full color. I don't know if you can see that. So we had like a full color textbook from Amazon based on our OER, right from Google Docs, and it was really easy to make. So right now, this is the draft version of the textbook. You can see it says like not for resale. But if Amazon can print these for like $11 or $12 a pop, then that would be really cool. And there's never any requirement that students buy the book. I just want to make sure that they have the ability to. So if they want to buy the book, I'll work with the bookstore, because I can get these books at cost from Amazon. I think I get like an order of 1,000 of them. So I get some if the bookstore did want to carry it and give it to them at cost, and then the bookstore can sell them, you know, with their markup or whatever they want. My takeaway right now is don't have students just read the book, have them write the book. And there was actually an article in Faculty Focus, and this link is also on the last slide as well. There's an article that came out maybe 5 weeks ago. It came out February 2nd, about the importance of having students. Is like I couldn't have planned this a little any better, but it's empowering college students to be OER creators and curators. And some of the things that they said was like, in addition to actually like testing better, like the students kind of, because they were engaged maybe in the curation and the creation, were able to like engage more with the content. but some of the byproducts were like media literacy skills, 21st century skills like communication, teamwork, technical literacy, creative thinking, planning, things like that. And so this article is worth a read. It's maybe like a 2-minute read, but that link is at the end of this presentation as well. And this is like their very first thing. It said that surveys from students show that their motivation and attitudes were improved. And I was like, oh, that's kind of like a perfect timing for that. In this slide, so this is the process. I think I've kind of covered the process of how I went about it. And just in fair disclosure, so I'm on year 6 at FLCC, and the very first year is when we did our OER for Java, and that was mostly faculty driven. I'd say like 95%, and that was a heavy lift because it was a lot of work, and we had a committee, and we, there's only 3 of us, but it still took a lot of time to go through there and make the textbook and refine it and change the order. And I was like, never again will I do that. That was a lot of work. And then this course kind of like fell into my lap, and it was something where I was like, well, I guess I've been through it once before. Let me see if I can do it with the students. So this is this was more student centered, more engagement from the students. And I was really pleased with the way this happened. In fact, I would do this again once this finishes up. So I think this summer is my chance to kind of like shore all this up and make sure that this book is good to go, and then make it super public. And by the way, this book is public. If you go to opencompsci.com, there's our Java book and our lab manual. This is the current textbook, so students can read it in Google site. This is just a Google Sites, so you can pick on any particular chapter. And the Google Doc that you saw here that I showed you before, that's the same exact one that you see here, except this doesn't have all the comments in it. So excuse me. So I just have to change one ground truth right here, and it gets pushed out to my courses and to the live facing website. And by the way, I know that this, I just want to say again how important it is to be able to have content that you can push out while it's live across all the places it lives. The reason that's really, really important, and the timing could not be better for this as well. Let me actually just go here and show you. So every class I teach has current experiences and upcoming experiences. Because I have developed all these resources, I put them in this folder so students, if they want to work ahead, can. Now, the reason it's so important to have content that can be pushed out without having to go into Blackboard and change anything is because if I have this image, and this image just lives in Google Drawings, if I make a change to this image, and I come back here into Blackboard and refresh it, and refresh it, that change is pushed out, which is awesome because right now my course lives in 3 different places. It lives in the FLCC Blackboard. It also lives in the SUNY Blackboard because I teach this in SUNY Online. And then there's another place where it lives in SUNY because a different faculty member is teaching this class. So it was really mission critical that I use Google Docs because this ground truth, this document lives in all 3 of those places. If I change it here, it's push out instantaneously. I don't have to go into Blackboard and change a thing. Which means when we migrate to Desire to Learn next semester, I need to change 0 things in the way that this Blackboard course is designed, because everything is live and any change to that content. So I don't have to touch this course at all when I come back, when I put it into Desire to Learn. In fact, this right here is information from a Google Sheet. So I go into that Google Sheet and I change the due dates here. The only thing I'll ever have to change in Blackboard or Desire to Learn are the due dates in the calendar. But if I decide that I'm gonna, change this up, I can do it right from Google Sheets and it gets pushed out to all 3 courses. So I've been using Google Docs because of what I call ground truth, or ground source. I have one source of ground truth and it lives in Google Docs, whether it's a Google Sheet like you see here, whether it's like the labs that you see, or there's a lab right there, whether it's the lab that you see or my course syllabus, it's all in Google Docs. I change it in Google Docs. I don't even have to log into Blackboard to change a thing. So that's why it was important for me to kind of live in the Google Docs environment. And I know a lot of campuses are Microsoft 365. In fact, my campus is Microsoft 365. But what Microsoft's version of this is not nearly as good. So I use Google Docs for everything I do. One of the other reasons I use Google Docs is for this lab experience. So I'm going to hop back over to this lab. So the student makes their own copy from clicking on the link. When a student, let's say that students have done this lab, they've worked on it, it's done, it's good. They know that they want to submit it. All they have to do is share the lab. They just have to make sure that I can comment on it. So right now they own the lab. And I'll just make sure I'm the student. I'm student Dave. I'm copying this link. I go back into Blackboard and I go to submit that lab. All I have to do is put a link to it right here. And then I just submit that as a student, which is no different than like, it is a little different than uploading, say, a Word file or a PDF, because in Blackboard, and I'm sure most of you have noticed this, when you leave comments on like a Word file or PDF or whatever they're using, I think they use Box in Blackboard. When you do that, those comments live and die in Blackboard for that semester. You're like pigeonholed in there. And I really wanted the students to own the document and have access to my comments in perpetuity. So here's what it looks like when the student submits it. I'm going to go into the course and actually grade it. And I am actually going to hide or pause my share real quick while I go into the course, just because I have student names in here. So I just got to navigate to the course. And I'm going to resume the share. So now I'm in my teacher view. So in my teacher view, I can click on this link. It pops me up to their Google Doc. And I can leave whatever comments I want in the doc. So I'm going to wait for it to, actually, I'm going to wait for it to kind of render right here. And when it does, say, these are all the places where they're putting answers. And I know in my case, it's just screenshots, but in any discipline, it can be whatever you want it to be. So I'm going to click on evidence for, let's say that I'm like, okay, need some work. How about port 80? And I'll say comment. What happens is the student, they can go right to their email. They'll get an email notification. One of the other deficiencies to Blackboard comments also is students might not know if they have comments, but also it's really hard sometimes to highlight and get the comments where you want it. And the other thing is students can't respond to those comments. You can't kind of have a conversation about that. And I think I lied when I said it was instantaneous. I think sometimes it takes like 10 or 15 minutes for the comments to come to the student's email. But when they do, they can, in that email, respond to the comment. And then I, as the instructor, get the email. And then I can respond to that comment. So we can have a chain right through email. I never have to go into Blackboard again. So that's one of the reasons why I use the Google Doc mentality as well for the labs. And at the end of the semester, they have access to everything they've ever submitted with my comments on it. And they don't have to worry about losing, you know, like what conversations we had.
Question about this, Dave, if I could.
Yeah.
So a question from Chrissy, did you have any trouble with students not doing the sharing settings correctly for submissions, or do you address that in the beginning of class?
Yes, I addressed it in the beginning of class. That's an excellent question, very astute. I will say this, I've tried a number of things, and this semester I did 3 things. One of them is before you can access any of the content in the course, there is an orientation. It's a video orientation, and it has like a quiz that goes along with it. And the orientation is basically like addressing the hot spots, and that's one of them because I constantly have that struggle. The other one is like LinkedIn articles and parsing it. So what I do, and I make this very clear in the course syllabus, in this orientation, and in the very first time they submit a lab. In fact, the very first lab that they submit is basically like, submit this lab, I will give you 0 on it no matter how well you do, because you need to know how to resubmit things. And I say that because I'm like, this for chapters 1 and 2, half the time students, like, it's not malicious, you just don't share it right. So if you ever submit it wrong, not a big deal. I'll put a 0 in the grade book, and I'll also put a comment right in Blackboard that says, you did great, just change the sharing settings and resubmit. And I'll tell you, so I was kind of a little bit stubborn about that this semester, and it kind of goes against like every grain of like motivation and positive reinforcement to like give so many students 0s, but I have not had an issue after the first chapter. So, and it is like, I don't want to say that it's tough love because it's not really like tough love, but it is helpful for them in priming them with that very first lab where I say, by the way, your first lab, I'm giving you a 0 no matter how well you do or if you follow everything to the core. In fact, it's probably worth showing you. One of the really nice things about Google Docs is, wait for it. It allows you to insert checkboxes. So their very first lab is has checkboxes. Actually, what's the best way to show this to you? I think actually the best way to show it to you is here.
Dave, while you're grabbing that lab,
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any comment on the accessibility of Google Docs? And this kind of comes from, you post the students post the link to submit the assignment, and so Ally probably won't check that because it's a link.
Sure. So is your question, how can I ensure that my Google Docs are accessible?
Really, it's just asking how is the accessibility for Google Docs? Is it?
The accessibility in Google Docs is very good, especially because the way that the way that it's designed using the headings. So I use those textual hierarchies. The screen readers actually do that really well. So by making it such that I have this on the side makes it even more accessible. And I also always include like my alt text on the image. Ooh, that's a terrible example. Almost always include the alt text on the images. So from a screen reader, and I've tested this, you could test this with Chromevox or if you have any other screen reader. Google Docs does a very good job. It doesn't do a great job if you export this to a PDF. I don't think, the last time I checked, it doesn't do a great job exporting to PDF A. But in general, it's very good. And I'm in the wrong chapter here. This is super embarrassing for a computer science teacher. And well, I am a washed up instructional designer. So I cut my teeth as an instructional designer with Aaron at MCC a few years ago. But this is, okay, this is the lab that I want to show you. Sorry about that. Sorry it took so long. But when they click into the lab, it has at the very bottom of it, these are interactive checkboxes. So students will be like, yes, I understand I'm going to get a 0. I'll resubmit it after I get a 0 and be regraded. This is an indictment, blah, 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 blah. I should probably add something. I think I do a pretty good job of couching this lab of saying like, the reason I do this is because invariably at some point in the semester, you're going to screw something up, and I just want you to be used to getting a 0. So I say that in the orientation. I should probably add that in here. So students have to like check these boxes before they give me the submission. I mean, I guess they don't have to, but all of them have. And so there is some kind of scaffolding there for that. Are there any other questions?
I have a lot of just comments and feedback in the chat, but no other questions that I see. So
Okay.
far.
So I kind of planned for this occurrence. There are two things that I kind of really want to show you, if there's time, using Google Docs. And at CIT, I'll actually be presenting a whole workshop on this, so we'll have a lot more time. So if you're intrigued by the possibility of using Google Docs for efficiency, you might want to think about attending CIT. And Aaron, I don't know if there's a link to CIT that you can post in the chat.
Yep, I have that.
Thanks. So one of the other things I do in the spirit of just efficiency, not having to update my office hours, because if you teach 6 classes in this across 2 or 3 different learning management systems, if you changing your office hours can be really, really kind of a pain in the neck. So I use this for more than just office hours. But I embed this Google Sheet, wait for it. I embed this Google Sheet in Blackboard. So if students come into Blackboard and like, oh, what are the office hours for Dave? I actually call them student hours. I stole that from Bonnie Stahoviak, one of her podcasts. This is just a Google Sheet. And normally everything runs much faster, but I have about 100 tabs open and Zoom. So this will like pop them right into my office hours. And so when it changes semester to semester, I just change this text to like fall 2022 and change like all these boxes, and it gets pushed out automatically to the student view. But the second thing that I do that I think is really clever, and this is fairly new in Google Sheets and Google Docs, but the integration, I can change, let's say that I want to change by appointments only, I don't know, afternoon or something like that. In my course syllabus, I guess we call them course outlines or course information sheets at FLCC. If this looks like it's in the Google Doc, but it's actually linked to the Google Sheet. So you'll see an update button. I just hit that button and boom, I'm done with my office hours. It's all centralized. Again, one ground truth, and it lives in Google Sheets. So thus concludes my screen sharing. I hope that what we went over made sense. I think the crux of it is the process. It is in my experience, it's a multi-step process where you have to go through and kind of chunk out what you're going to do and be like, this semester I'm going to focus on content creation. This semester I'm going to create on question generation. This semester I'm going to focus on editing and stuff like that.
Yeah, and your structure that you provided with us, that's a really good kind of outline to follow if you want to take it slow and just kind of jump in somewhere where it makes sense for your course.
Yes.
There is another question in the
about
chat.
the
I don't know
copy.
if you see it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if I could just share my screen real quick, I know I'll only take 20 seconds to do this. And it actually is in the slide presentation. But you can append any URL that you have that's a Google Doc. People don't know this, but you can change this to copy. If you make that your hyperlink, it forces the students to make a copy. You can also do preview, and it will give it a preview view. And my favorite is export ? Format equals PDF. Ooh, that's formate. I guess I'll just show it in here. If you take any Google Doc URL and change it to format equals PDF instead of edit, export, it will download as a PDF, that current state, the snapshot of it right then, same as Google Docs, or you could do /copy and it'll force a copy, or /preview and it will give you that preview.
Yeah, we're all going to start doing that to save time now.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like my course outline, I go through it every semester, but I just change like some of the dates. I hit the refresh button on my office hours, and I make sure that the rest of the content still holds true. And I don't have to worry about uploading it to Blackboard because it lives in Google Docs and I know it's already there. Any changes are live. In fact, over the semester, if I notice there's a mistake in any of my work, I just change it right then and there, and it's set for the next semester. And it's pushed out live across all the tenants.
True. Yeah, absolutely. Are there other questions for Dave? And just looking at the time, if anybody has to go, absolutely, we totally understand. I just wanted to capture any final questions in the recording. And I did put the links in the chat if you are looking for that recording later on, and Dave's slides. So any other closing questions or thoughts? Oh, Shirley, just to answer your question, the recording should be available this afternoon. As soon as it renders, I try to get it uploaded.
And I did want to also say that Cooler's website, it has a button for accessibility for color blindness. And if you hit it, it will take your palette and show you the 6 different kinds of color blindness and what it would look like. It's bonkers.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Robin,
I'm
did
just
you have
blown away
something?
that you've turned this all into, you've made Google Docs just seem so accessible to actually, I mean, I feel like a lot of the time with this week, what I've been learning about with involving students in the creation of OER is how much work and how difficult it is to kind of pull them in, and how much trepidation they have. But this makes it seem so accessible and doable.
Yeah, it's especially because Google Docs actually, or Google Suite, or Google for Education, is now the dominant force in K-12. So anyone who's coming in who's a traditional student, chances are they've used Google Docs before. So you're right, it's not like Pressbooks, nothing against Pressbooks, but there's an overhead to using Pressbooks, and there's an overhead to using other tools like wikis, and this is just like natural. So that's one of the reasons I didn't even really thought about that, but like there is no really cognitive load for using Google Docs. You just go in, if you've used Word or Google Docs, you're golden.
It's just so cool.
Thanks. And I'm always happy to chat, or like if any of your institutions want me to come in and do something, whether Zoom or not, I do pro bono work for everyone who's here. This is your special purpose, special prize for registering today.
First, you have to get faculty to attend.
Yeah, and kind of like
struggle with that.
The sexy hook is really like, listen, faculty, this makes your job, like, are you sick of uploading syllabuses every semester? Are you sick of like changing your PowerPoints and uploading them? And so the sexy hook here is just like, you don't have to anymore. And by the way, you can do all this stuff with Office 365. I just don't, because Microsoft is much clunkier than Google Docs. Chrissy, seriously, I'm happy to come in and work with you and your faculty and staff.
Or Dave could also make Chrissy the expert, and Chrissy could then take it forward.
Yes, I offer a turnkey training seminar, I suppose. But certainly, like at CIT in the spring, or it's like end of May, early June. I think the workshop's only an hour and a half, so we'll start to kind of do some of this. And I did see also in the chat, there was a question about like hosting my images in Google Drive. Yeah, not only do I do that because it's easier to control the images, but also because you can make hotspots on your images. So like one of the things that I do in one of my classes is Erin, is it okay if we're going over?
Yeah, because if folks have to go, that's totally fine. We don't have a next session, so I'll just capture it in the recording.
Okay. One of the things that, and maybe if you'll permit me to share my screen once more, I always strive to have like student examples in courses. So in this particular course, again, this is Google Drive, I took really good, one of the assignments, like make an infographic. So I took students assignments that I thought were really good, and I just made them into PDFs because I submitted, and I asked them. And I was like, can I make these as samples for students? So if you click on this is an image in Google Drive. And I already showed you kind of like what the Google Drive images look like. right here. So it's easy to work with. I should probably change that so that students don't come back and see all that. But this has hotspots. So if you click on these 3 different thumbnails, it will bring you to Jordan's infographic. This will bring you to the infographic that this anonymous student did. So it's very, very, very simple for me to change these sample works too. So if I get a better one in or something I want to showcase, I just go into this Google drawing. I'll delete this square, put in a different thumbnail, and put in a different hyperlink. So hyperlinks work in Google Drawings as well. But you kind of have to do something special for that to happen. So stay tuned for CIT.
And that's when we bookmark Dave's email and we ask him how to do it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thank you to everyone for attending. This is our last session this week. So again, recordings in the chat there in the link. And there's a survey for you if you have the chance to fill out, helps us plan for next year. And again, we just really appreciate everyone's time and attention.
It was so nice chatting with you.